I'm Michael Bungay Stania. This is Change Signal. This is the podcast where we cut through the blather and the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change. If you're a transformational leader and you are seeking modern change mastery, you have found the motherlode. You know, there are some words in organizational life that just get used a lot. And sometimes it's hard to know if there's any there. I think one of those words is strategic. I mean, people talk about strategic all the time. Let's have a strategic meeting. Let's make this a strategic document. Honestly, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. Nobody quite knows what strategic actually means. And I think another word like that might be community, certainly when we think about change, because so often we're going to move people from here to there. We need to build community around this. We're trying to build something here. The future of the organization is going to be community-based in some way. And in change, I think this is a powerful idea, but for many of us, this can feel intangible or uncertain or a bit woo-woo or a bit jazz-handy. So I really wanted to talk to somebody who knows about community, who's really thought about community, who's wrestled with the idea of what this means.
I had been up to that time using a Superman strategy where I was trying to be smart and work hard and just work all the time to make a difference.
That's Charles Vogl. He is the author of The Art of Community. And the insights in this book are hard-won. I mean, he has volunteered and worked everywhere from a homeless shelter in Southern California to the US Peace Corps in sub-Saharan Africa. And along the way, he's learned about what shifts when we move into building and then trusting community. And that's what this conversation is all about. Charles, welcome.
I'm delighted to be here, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. You know, as I reflect on the change leaders I know in organizations, I recognize that Superman syndrome around, at individual level, I need to do all of this and the weight of that. But even at a team level, it's like it's up to our team to do all of this. And it's exhausting and often fruitless. What's the first thing people need to unlearn to move away from the Superman syndrome, if we call it that, to a sense of inviting others in?
Well, it's a bold thing, Michael. We need to reject this erroneous interpretation of Darwin's survival of the fittest,
right,
that has been inculcated into our culture that we now know is toxic. Right. So the early 20th century interpretation of Darwinism is the person who is the strongest and the fastest and can get the meat the baddest, if that applies to our contemporary world. They deserve to win and be in charge, and they're the best.
Yeah.
Well, we now know, and I'm not the writer of this, there's a book called Does Altruism Exist that talks about this far better than I will here. We know that that's a fantastic rubric to understand what maturation looks like, be the best in the group, as long as your N is 1.
Right.
As soon as your N becomes bigger than 1, there's 3 of us, there's 5 of us, or 150 of us if it's a Dunbar number.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we don't want the person who wants to dominate everybody else, who heads out by themselves to show that they're the fastest.
Dunbar's number, if you're wondering what that is, that's coined by Robin Dunbar. He's a British academic. And it's the rule of thumb that says, as individuals, we kind of top out at about 150 friends, people whose names and faces and histories we can know and remember. I can recommend Dunbar's book, which is called Friends, Understanding the Power of Our Most Important Relationships.
We want the people who are willing to do 5 levels of investment of work so that there is a 7 to 10 units return to the community, whether they get 5 or 7 themselves.
Right.
And if you get a group of 100 people and all are willing to commit 5, so the group gets 10, now nobody can catch us.
Right.
And so we have to reject that somehow we're all individuals competing with each other, and what we need to do is leave people behind. That's the first thing we need to teach leadership.
Well, let me ask you how you guide people to let go of that, because I love the math behind that, which is like, if I can do 5 and that brings 7 to us collectively, and we all do that, then we become an extraordinary group of people, an extraordinarily resourced group of people. But it feels like there's lots of people going, yeah, I'm not going to do that. It feels a bit selfless. do you have to have a spiritual awakening to kind of go through this process?
It certainly helps. It's funny you should touch that, Michael. I don't know if you're joking. Much of my work is the material discussion of a spiritual maturation.
Mm.
If I never get to the place where I understand that at some level, I'm connected to other people, we can choose whatever nouns or verbs are appropriate and how we're connected and what connection is.
Yeah.
But if I never get to a place where I understand I'm connected to other people, then why would I spend 5 minutes thinking, why I would commit to them in what you and I would call community? Making sure they're fed, make sure they're warm enough, making sure in the worst day of their lives when a family member is diagnosed, they're not alone. Why would I do that if we're not connected? And what that would reduce me to is every relationship I have, including this one with you, Michael, right now, I'm constantly calculating at some level, am I winning this? And there's a reason that if, Michael, I find out that you're in the hospital, it may be a fantastic idea that I stop what I'm doing and go to the hospital and make sure you need something delivered to the room.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your work is often found by people who have really high stakes in the work that they do. And one of those groups is the military. Now, if I think of the military, and I have a bit of a naive perspective on that, I know a few people who are part of the military, but I don't really know that world. It feels that status and rank and authority are kind of key mechanics to the way that place works. And it feels like part of what you're inviting is a reduction of status and authority and control. How do you help people make that shift?
I just want to acknowledge the military is very, very complicated, and there are many different subcultures within the military.
Yeah.
One of the things that has been brought to my attention by people who are leaders in the military is that there are places in the military where war fighters are taught that everybody around them is their competition for assignments, training, and rank.
Yeah.
So it creates a zero-sum relationship. And there's acknowledgement in some leadership areas that that is toxic, right? So you say, how do we do it? When we find that we're operating in a culture with certain rules, and those rules are leading to outcomes that we don't like, we need to create a separate experience, a separate space where the rules are different. And in my work, we call that sacred, a sacred space. And all we mean by sacred in this context is it is set aside. It is no longer in the context we're familiar with. So I'll give you an example. I was approached by a veterans group in the Washington area that, for really, really good reasons, was concerned about, amongst other things, the domestic violence rate and the self-harm rates of veterans, the war fighters in our country. And in these discussions, I learned so much about what culture they were coming from and what culture they were experiencing when they got out, and how there are all these barriers to knit together these relationships. One officer told me that these people are rugged individuals. Mm-hmm. And rugged individuals don't come together and share. Actually, my marriage is falling apart. My kids don't talk to me. I'm drinking so much that I can't hold a job, and I'm thinking of harming myself. They just don't bring that up when they're busy being a rugged individual.
No.
So, amongst the things that we did is we programmed a ritualized dinner. And when we ritualize something, it's ritualized because we take actions that have meaning as opposed to being practical or efficient.
Yeah.
And so we could invite war fighters into a space where the rules were different. And we had a host who made sure they understood there were new rules and had ways of separating that. And we literally closed the door.
Yeah.
There's no people wandering through to hear what these guys are saying, and they are guys. And then when we have people in a space where the rules are different, now there's the possibility of something different happening.
This feels like an important point. A new space with new rules. And here's what I immediately notice. Most of the time, I don't know the old rules. They're so quote unquote obvious that they're not only not articulated, they're almost subconscious. So to create new rules, really you first need to surface the old rules. And actually doing an exercise to mark that shift, you could call it from X to Y, could be really interesting. I mean, for instance, it could be from a few people speak to everyone speaks. Now, I'd keep it to less than 5 new rules, otherwise it can be a bit overwhelming. But just to also acknowledge, this is hard work, this is archaeological work, it's change work. Okay, enough on this for now. Often when I've seen something like this happen, it takes a person to role model a degree of openness and vulnerability that gives permission to others to follow that. Mm-hmm. So how do you find that first person?
If you or I are in a leadership role on a team, the hard truth is we're probably going to have to go first ourselves.
Right.
The leader has to go first. The reason is you need to demonstrate to people you're convening what the space can handle.
Right.
And if I share something I'm really struggling with, the role doesn't know, and then they see that I'm not beat up and I'm not shamed and I don't have to wrestle with a stigma, all of a sudden now they have evidence like, oh, I guess the space can hold this. I guess the rules here are different than they are at a brunch at 10 a.m.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to gather people, with intention so they know, hey, we're not here to enjoy brunch.
Yeah.
There may be brunch involved, but we're not here to enjoy brunch. We're here to do something else. That is to share how we can all make a difference as thought leaders in this era, to support one another before we take on this big competition, like whatever it is. There has to be intention.
Yeah.
Another thing that needs to be in place is there needs to be a lot of clarity to the participants that if someone is a bad actor, there is someone in authority, either formal or informal, who's going to handle that.
I hear you.
So my point is there are investments we need to make that work and not just say, who goes first?
And then there's just, speaking of bad actors, the pressure of the status quo. You know, I just think when you're trying to create change and in creating a sacred space, it feels to me that you're moving the possibility of what might be happening into the future and going, we're holding this space in the future. But the status quo grabs your ankles and pulls you back into the present and the rules of this is the way we've always done it. What wisdom can you share with us around how do you hold the space once you've established it?
So, all spaces may not be sacred all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
And, when I'm thinking about working with a team or a company, we need to create spaces that serve a purpose, help bind together a leadership team, right? Help create space for people to share things they've been afraid to share so far. And then we close it. There are certain places that may remain sacred, which is to say the rules are different there than they are elsewhere all the time.
Right.
And for the purposes of my work, we call that a temple. And you said, how do we hold the boundaries? Well, part of the boundaries is we have rules of what happens and doesn't happen there that may be okay elsewhere.
Yeah. It's striking the spiritual, religious language you use, the sacred space, the ritual, the temple. In the work you do you have people push back against that? I mean, like I'm an atheist myself, and don't have a strong reaction to it, but it's noticeable for me that you're using that language. And I don't have alternatives to that language, but I'm wondering how you navigate that language in what is often a secular setting.
So I virtually work in almost exclusively secular settings.
Yeah.
And when I use my terms, I define them. So I define sacred as set aside. You can project anything else you want on top of that, but all I said is set aside. When I talked about rituals, I said we do things that have meaning. They're not simply practical or efficient.
Right.
Right. We didn't talk about what meanings we're applying to them.
Got it.
So as long as I'm defining my terms, usually people who are actually interested and want to learn something can follow me.
Yeah. I do think this idea of a ritual being a signifier of moving from one state to another state is a really powerful way, and just understanding it as that, a kind of a formalized action that allows a transition can be a really powerful tool. Mm-hmm. You're going to find out a lot more about Charles and his work at his website, charlesvogl.com. So that's Charles, VOGL.com. And just to note, the second edition of his book, The Art of Community, came out in early 2025. So if you're thinking of buying a copy of his book, make sure you pick up the second edition. Actually, there's a book I like about ritual. And one of the stories that the author tells in that is around, the CrossFit experience. And I think you reference that in your book as well, which is like that whole experience of working in a CrossFit is a community. It has rituals, that the box, is the temple. There's ways of belonging in that space which are really clearly defined. And it's a non-religious but sacred space with ritual, with temple, all of that combined.
Mm-hmm.
So as we've been talking, part of where I've been thinking about is what does it mean as a change agent, a change leader, to be creating belonging, creating sacred space for their team to allow them to be a force of change in their organization. But also what we're trying to do as we move an organization through change or have that process unfold for us is in some ways create a future community, a future sense of belonging to this is the future state of what this organization is. How scalable is community and belonging?
It's scalable as long as you respect it happens in small units.
Got it.
So CrossFit is scalable.
Yeah.
But any given CrossFitter doesn't do exercise with the CrossFit world. They do exercise with their coach and the less than 20 people in their class at that hour. And community is the same way. So Michael, my guess that if you get a really, really bad diagnosis today, there's at least 5 people that you can and may call to tell them, okay, new chapter of life, game on.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, there is. That's right.
Michael, am I wrong in that every single one of those people that you will call, you form those relationships in small, undistracted gatherings that happen in a series?
Right.
So if I've got an emergency department team, or I've got a military team, or I've got a faculty at an education organization that's taking on enormous challenges with political division, violence, and mental health challenges. If I want them to have the cohesion that you enjoy, I need to give them time and space to form that in these small areas. And for the purposes of my work, we call that campfire experiences.
I'm sliding in here just to highlight the power of metaphor, of turning an idea into a thing. Look, I don't want meetings, but a campfire experience? Well, yes, please.
We simply call it that because we know that our families, literally our families, have been forming these relationships over campfires for untold generations. We're pushing up against a culture that in an uninformed assumption says, if I want to connect people critical for me in my organization, in my city, in my family, in my volunteer group, we need to create big events with a lot of entertainment, and we need to invite everybody all the time.
Right.
Which is exactly the opposite
of
how you formed all the people you would turn to when you need help.
That's right. Have you found a range of size, at least this number of people, but probably starts capping out at this number of people for these kind of intimate units that you're talking about?
For the purposes of teaching,
I
say when we're gathering strangers, the max is 5.
Yeah.
And the reason is there's a math equation that's demonstrated in what's called the Brooks lines of communication, and you can look that up and it'll come right up.
Yeah.
And if you add one more person to a group of 5, so you have 6, you increase the number of relationships getting managed in that group by fully 50%. And if you add a 7th person, you've literally doubled the number of communication lines that are going on over a group of 5. Which is to say that if I put a group of authors in a small group and I add just 2 more, it's just 2 more.
Yeah.
I've now doubled your burden on how much you're tracking and managing to build relationships.
So you can always Google Brooks' law to see this visually. But in short, 3 people have 3 lines of communication between them. So you can picture a triangle. 4 people have 6 lines. So it's like a box with a cross in the middle. 5 people have 10, and 7 people have 21 different lines of communication to track. In other words, things get exponential and complicated fast.
And you already know from your own experience, groups of 2 and 3 are fantastic. So there's no reason to go bigger. You got 7 people, group of 3, a group of 4.
Yeah, actually as a facilitator, I tend to say, look, 2s are great, 3s are great, 3s are particularly powerful. Fours I try and avoid because often that splits into two pairs. So it kind of often loses a little cohesion. But 5 is the best set for a complex, intimate conversation because it's hard to opt out. It's hard to not pull somebody back in, and you create different perspectives, different points of view in that conversation. What's the one thing you'd love people to deeply understand about community and belonging? Something that you're like, this is the thing I would love to really land with people that people don't quite get at the moment.
Yeah, it looks really boring.
Right.
When we understand that really good community, the community that really deeps us, that moves us, looks really boring, then now we get permission to invite people to things that look really boring.
Right.
But that hike in that park might be the best few hours you spend this year.
Well, I'm off for a walk in my local park. It's High Park, about a 10-minute walk from me here in Toronto. But before I go, I do want to thank you for your support of the pod. Look, a review is always delightful. Sharing a favorite episode with a colleague, even more so. Now, if you're going to share this on LinkedIn, fantastic. And do tag me so I can say thank you. Thanks for doing the work. I'm glad you're here.